Good morning, everyone. It's Wednesday, November 11th. From the San Antonio Express News, my name is Luis Vasquez, and this is your Express Briefing. All of the stories you need to know to start your day. You can expect partly sunny skies and a high of 82 degrees in San Antonio today. Today's Veterans Day, and a number of services like banks and the post office are closed. We have a guide to what's open and what's not at expressnews.com. Bexar County commissioners have approved a set of legislative goals for 2021, adding Medicaid expansion as a priority, and discussed the funding of public health networks such as University Health System as a key point of focus in the pandemic. Our Talking San Antonio series has two events this week. Join us online today for a conversation with Brigadier General Caroline M, and our conversation tomorrow is with U.S. Representative Will Hurd, a three-term congressman from Helotes. And now let's move on to our top stories for the day. Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick said in a press release that any person who comes forward with evidence that leads to an arrest and final conviction of voter fraud will be paid a minimum of $25,000. The money would come from Patrick's campaign funds. Though numerous studies have found no evidence of widespread voter fraud in U.S. elections, Trump and his supporters have been ringing alarms about cheating at the ballot box since 2016, when he won the presidency despite receiving nearly 3 million fewer votes than Democrat Hillary Clinton. Patrick's reward offer comes as Trump's administration calls on its supporters to send examples of voter fraud to the campaign. Jeremy Wallace explains the details of the program and the situation at expressnews.com. As state historical sites go, few can rival this remote, muddy ford on the Pecos River for rank obscurity. Until recently, only a bullet-pocked, vandalized state historical marker erected in 1936, miles off the paved road, gave any hint of the wrenching frontier dramas that once played out here 30 miles northeast of Fort Stockton. As the marker inscription notes, the crossing got its odd name from the bleached animal skulls found hanging from bushes by a government surveyor in 1850. Back then, when it was one of the few safe crossings along the treacherous high-banked Pecos River, this was an action-packed, perilous place. John McCormick has the story of the people making sure a Horsehead crossing will not be forgotten. The Air Force has long fought a losing battle against real estate development near its runways on Joint Base San Antonio-Randolph. But the demolition of old homes in an area that should be clear of them allowed officials to claim a victory of sorts on Tuesday. The homes were in one of Randolph's clear zones, areas 3,000 feet by 3,000 feet at the end of runways that, ideally, are free of structures or places where people are likely to gather in large numbers. In all, 10 homes in Universal City and Cibolo were razed last week. The lots will have grass placed on them and remain vacant. But many more buildings remain in the base's clear zones and accident potential zones, which are intended to provide a safety buffer between air traffic at the base and homes and businesses in nearby heavily populated communities. Sig Christensen has more on that fight at expressnews.com. Judy Clark apologized for running 3 hours late for a scheduled phone interview on a recent Friday afternoon. But the chief executive of San Antonio's Fresh Texas had a good excuse for being tardy. Fresh Texas, a fruit and vegetable supplier to grocery stores, had just completed its acquisition of the Cece's Veggie Noodles manufacturing plant in Austin for an undisclosed price. 50-year-old Clark, a former executive with the Keebler Company and Treehouse Foods, discussed the Cece's deal, her career, and how Fresh Texas has responded to the pandemic during our interview. You can find the Q&A at expressnews.com. For the third consecutive election cycle, Democrats saw their advantage over Republicans grow in 21 counties along Interstate 35, allowing them to further chip into the Republican dominance that has lasted for nearly 3 decades. Explore how the I-35 counties changed from the 2016 to the 2020 presidential elections with this story and interactive map at expressnews.com. Next up are your need-to-know headlines. You can find all of these headlines and more inside your Express News subscription. On Tuesday evening, San Antonio Mayor Ron Nirenberg said he'll quarantine for 2 weeks after he came in contact with someone who later tested positive for the coronavirus. City officials announced 332 new cases in Bexar County. The annual Raul Jimenez Thanksgiving dinner will deliver all of its meals this year to people's homes or nonprofit organizations that feed the hungry, a smaller feast for a smaller crowd due to the coronavirus pandemic. A coalition of Black Lives Matter supporters and community activists converged on Hurd City Hall on Tuesday evening in support of an 18-year-old who was tackled, kicked, and repeatedly tased by police. Propelled by the waves of protest over police misconduct this past summer, Democrats in the Texas legislature are pushing for increased scrutiny of discriminatory law enforcement practices in their first batch of proposed bills for the upcoming legislative session. Several states legalized marijuana last week. Advocates for marijuana legalization are hopeful Texas lawmakers will take up meaningful reform this upcoming 2021 legislative session. A federal grand jury has indicted a 44-year-old Cibolo man in what authorities described as a fraudulent scheme involving firearm sales on the internet. More than 750 cars lined up at Traders Village on Tuesday morning for the San Antonio Food Bank's latest giveaway. The groceries distributed Tuesday will feed about 3,300 people, a third of them children, according to the food bank. District 7 Councilwoman Anna Sandoval wants to add protection of the Edwards Aquifer to the city charter, which would make aquifer protection more or less a permanent function of the city. A week after the election, Republican Tony Gonzalez is looking forward. The next 2 months are a race up to his swearing-in ceremony filled with constituent services and introductions with new colleagues, and then the work begins on Capitol Hill. This Veterans Day, Chris Tomlinson wants to celebrate the enlisted person, the young man or woman who never wore an officer's silver or gold braid but did the hard grunt work that protects the nations and wins wars. We should all honor the humble person who used military service to serve their country and better their lives. San Antonio's Rackspace Technology Incorporated said Tuesday it lost $101 million in the third quarter on sharply higher revenue. A federal judge Tuesday sentenced San Antonio oil man Brian Alfaro to 10 years and 1 month in prison for defrauding investors in the sale of units in oil and gas wells in Gonzales County. Last week, business columnist Michael Taylor took a deep dive into a financial product he previously knew little about. You can find out what he learned about long-term care insurance and whether he thinks it might be right for you at expressnews.com. Bred in Del Valle near Austin, Horse Puppy had a rough ponyhood. Because he didn't sell as a foal, he spent much of his time with the other horses, mostly mares. They did not treat him well. Horses have a pecking order, and Horse Puppy was always at the bottom, his owner said. When we got him, he was covered with bites and kick marks from those mares, keeping him in line. Not surprisingly, this poor treatment left Horse Puppy feeling none too generous to his fellow equines. He craves human interaction instead. The sweet Appaloosa has made friends with all his neighbors and gets regular rides to the area's leafy streets. Head over to expressnews.com to read about Horse Puppy, a friendly horse who's become the unofficial mascot of the Northwood neighborhood. Blue jays may be some of the loudest birds in San Antonio, but they're also some of the smartest and most devoted parents. Renee Guzman takes a closer look at what makes the blue jay such a colorful character. A duo formerly affiliated with Seersucker Gin have launched Ranch brand wine and spirits for San Antonio-made affordable vodka, gin, rum, and whiskey. Head over to expressnews.com to find a craft lesson adapted from the San Antonio Zoo to create a fish from a recycled bottle of water and imagine what it would be like to swim the depths of the sea. Bill and Ted Face the Music, Chick Flick, and Mallrats are all in our roundup of what's new or notable in home video this week. Best Quality Daughter, the new Asian American restaurant at the Pearl from chefs Javier Juan Doberdin and Queely Watson of Tenko Ramen, will open on Friday. And that's all for today. This was your Express briefing for Wednesday, November 11th. My name is Luis Vasquez. Please consider becoming an Express News subscriber to get in-depth coverage on all the stories you heard today. Also, be sure to rate and review this podcast inside of your Apple Podcast app, as it really helps the show. Have a wonderful day, everyone.